Hello and welcome to another episode of Pakistonomy. This is our 200th episode, and what an amazing time to have the 200th episode because this week, as many of you may have already followed, India announced the election results for the 2024 general elections. There was a lot of conversation about what this would mean 400 seats, what the future of the Indian Republic would look like under a third Modi administration. And to be very honest and frank, at least to me at a personal level, the results were quite surprising. I was expecting the BJP to do a lot better than what it did currently in the results, where they can't even form a government on their own. So the allies of the NDA, in particular, Chandrababu Naidu and Nitish Kumar, will play a key role. But all of that is something that I am very excited to talk about with Rahul Verma, who is a fellow at the Center for Policy Research and visiting assistant professor in the Department of Political Science at Ashoka University. He has a PhD in political science from the University of California, and somebody who's done a lot of research on the Indian political system, on political representation, parties, voting behavior, writes frequently for various news platforms, comments on TV. He was on TV yesterday. I was watching some remarks. I think you will be on a panel later after we record this conversation. So it's a busy time for you, Rahul. So thank you so much for joining the podcast. And before I hand it over to you, he's also an author of a book with Pradeep Chibbar, Ideology and Identity, the Changing Party Systems of India, which again is very relevant given all of the dynamics we've seen with the results. So with that, Rahul, welcome to Pakistan with me, and thank you so much for taking out the time in this busy period for you.
Thank you so much for having me, Uzair. I look forward to our conversation.
I want to begin. The election results are out. It's one of those weird elections. I was looking at a X comment where somebody said this is one of the few election results where victory seems like defeat and defeat seems like victory, which is fair. I think the Congress Party with 100 seats sounding a lot more confident than it would have otherwise. And the BJP, despite 240 seats, 2.4 times more seats in parliament than the next party in line, which is the Congress. A lot of people saying this is peak Modi, and this is basically the beginning of the end of the NDA and the BJP as a force to be reckoned with, or at least the force that we've seen in the last 10 years. How do you see the results, and what has stood out to you in the last 24 hours or so?
Okay, so I agree with you. I'm surprised by the results. Someone who studies elections and voting behavior, I'm always ready for surprises on counting day because that has been the story of my life for 15 years. And as an academic, I don't care about just the big picture number, which is how many seats any party won. So that's like a small part of the surprise. The surprise really lies in the details. There is always so much of social churning in a big and diverse country like India that details always tell you something more than what the headline pictures say. Even like when a couple of months we had this assembly elections in Madhya Pradesh, Chhattisgarh, Rajasthan, Telangana, while exit polls had got most of that right. I think the victory of BJP in some of those states, like the extent of victory, was perhaps not sort of expected in that fashion. So I think on counting day, there is always it's always full of surprises, and so I did get surprised. I had not anticipated the kind of rout BJP faced in its core state of Uttar Pradesh, and that made a big difference to their final tally of falling below 272. While some people had definitely, like those who were traveling on the ground, had warned many of us that BJP might not be getting the kind of number it had in 2019. But given its victory margin, we thought that there are going to be some swings and shifts here and there, but they might be able to come back with a comfortable majority again. I think exit polls on Saturday just had taken things to another level, which is not that they are coming back to majority with some losses here and there. It's just like they are going to massively improve their performance. And that would have been historic if that had happened. Now it seems that elections in India continues to play a corrective mechanism, continues to inform everyone, parties, political analysts, pollsters, that we will be ready for surprises. There's no majority which is permanent. There is no ideological hegemony which is going to be permanent. We will continue to mix and mash every time. And what is much more interesting, 12 hours after the results, I don't have an explanation for what happened. And to my mind, I don't think one explanation would suffice what has happened. Just to give you this fact from the results, BJP, while losing in 4 states, has managed to break in new states. It had never won Odisha. It's going to form government in Odisha. Across the Bay of Bengal coastline, if you go to the southern tip, they have been able to improve their vote share. They have, like, if you look at from Gujarat to Odisha, that entire central belt, which is largely sort of dominated by poorer population, tribals, BJP has completely sort of like swept that region. So while in defeat, they continue to remain the single largest party and single largest party by a far margin. They have 240 seats, and the entire India alliance is still below 240 seats, right? They have 36% vote share, and Congress vote share still with improvement is just 21%. And the seat tally is below 100. So they continue to be single largest party by a far margin. Similarly, while Congress has definitely doubled its seat tally, some improvement in vote share, and that's considerable given that they contested almost 100 seats less than last time. Their alliance worked in some states like UP and Maharashtra, but didn't work in states like Delhi and Bihar. They managed to challenge BJP in states like Rajasthan and Haryana, but did not manage to challenge in Gujarat or Madhya Pradesh. So the election results are much more complicated than any explanation at the moment I have seen, read, or thought of.
Oh, that's a fair point, right? And again, I was talking to somebody yesterday as well, and this was my point. Like, there are stories within stories here. Like Uttar Pradesh, there's a conversation. I think this morning I was reading, you may have seen some articles as well on like issues related to stray cattle, yogis sidelining or lack of interest, RSS being unhappy, right? Maharashtra is a whole different story on that side with the internal dynamics at play. You already talked about Odisha and sort of Delhi and other dynamics. So we'll get more data on that. But in particular, something that has stood out to me, and you're one of the experts on this, right, is the role of ideology. The sort of like poetic sort of signal that we've seen from, for example, the constituency of the Ram Mandir, where the BJP lost, or a lot of results where in places where the prime minister sort of had the most shrill sort of polarizing speeches, the candidates of the BJP lost over there. What signal are you seeing from the fact that at its sort of like peak, the 38% seems to be the best that BJP can do in terms of national voter share? And the fact that almost as if the signal, at least to me, seems to be that the core ideological conversation related to Hindutva as an ideology seems to sort of has reached its limits. And if you want to go beyond that, because the BJP was expecting north of 40%, you got to do something else. Like, what does it tell us about the ideological underpinnings of their strategy?
Absolutely, Uzair. I think what we learned from the results yesterday, that political parties have to continuously innovate. There is a limit to any kind of mobilizational strategy, whether it's ideological or based on welfare delivery or based on leadership charisma, will have some limits. And so this mix, along with, say, nationalism frenzy in around 2019 election, got you to 37% vote share mark, and may have also helped you to take advantage of anti-incumbency sentiments in the newer pockets where you have managed to penetrate. But there are limits to something like this. At the end of the day, in a large, diverse, poor country where issues of bread and butter and economic anxieties and jobs and employment are going to play a crucial role, you can only take some of these sort of like narratives that far. Ideological issues generally is to enthuse your core vote base, which can go out and then campaign for you. Right? And then you brought the welfare sort of like thing to add new voters, especially the poor, which were not part of your coalition earlier in your limit. I think even Prime Minister's appeal as a strong man and someone who comes from a middle caste, I think using some of those ideas brought BJP to where it is. But if BJP wants to improve its performance, they need to sort of like introspect and perhaps innovate. And just to sort of like, add to this point of like still campaign that 2024 saw, I think while some of us thought that was a knee-jerk reaction after the first phase turnout drop, it seems that BJP had sensed that things are not going as they had planned. And perhaps their sort of like slogan of that we are going to cross 400 in some ways have not worked. Perhaps their own base might got overconfident that we are winning anyways. Why do we need to sort of like do the extra work? The fence sitters, especially those who were anxious on economic issues, they thought, like they're not doing anything to improve our lives. Let's just sit out. And perhaps that up ki bar, char so par created a kind of existential crisis for voters who lean towards opposition parties, mainly from, say, lower caste and Muslims, might have thought this is an existential moment and we need to turn out in greater numbers, right? So perhaps a detailed and greater analysis of turnout composition will tell us a little bit more. But this definitely tells you, like, sometimes strategies of psychological domination can give you negative returns.
No, that's a very important point because I've sort of had two frameworks on the 400 and the impact, complacency impact of that. I'm a sports fan. For the listeners who know, I'm an Arsenal fan. And this is a common thing, right? In sports, when you think, oh, I'm a done. The World Cup is going on right now. It's Ireland, I can beat them, or it's the Netherlands. That's when upsets happen because you're kind of
Yes.
complacent going in. And then on the reverse sort of mobilization side, right, it's similar what we're seeing here in the United States. Post Roe v. Wade and the overturn of Roe v. Wade in the Supreme Court, the right has sort of achieved its goal, right? And now the anxiety is on the other side, primarily on young women who are saying, well, my abortion rights are about to be taken away. And there is a movement towards doing that through state legislatures. And now I need to come out and vote because if I don't, it's going to be a much more difficult situation for me as at a personal level to live in. So it's a common theme that we're seeing, at least in the US and I'm sure in other parts of the world. I want to come to the opposition now, the India Alliance, or the India Alliance, as the NDA likes to call it, stitched up a broad and diverse coalition. The Samajwadi Party in the UP outperformed, as you alluded to as well. Congress is doubling its share. What do you think they got right, and where do they go from here, right? Because there's obviously wind in their sails, but this is, in my view at least, and I would love to hear your perspective, is only the beginning. They have a long way to catch up.
Sure, absolutely. I think, see, uh, let's start from like go back to Bharat Jodo Yatra, which Rahul Gandhi did at the end of 22, beginning of 23. I think what that yatra did uh, was able to arrest decline in his popularity and created a little bit more positive momentum in his favor. Then Congress party wins Karnataka. And I'm not saying it was a Bharat Jodo Yatra effect. It was largely misgovernance of BJP in that state. The chief minister was not popular. There was a lot of alleged corruption charges and other things. I think that created a momentum in favor of opposition. And, there were built up anxieties, especially COVID has sort of like just happened. People, lives have been changed and everything. And then in the summer of 2023, you saw this broad-based coalition coming together. And so if you are sitting in summer 2023, you would have thought that now BJP is going to get a tough competition just because the sheer arithmetic of these diverse parties coming together. But at that time, I also think that perhaps Congress over-anticipated or over-interpreted the mandate from Karnataka, and it thought that it would be easy to replicate the Karnataka success story across all India. They thought we are on now a comeback train. And somehow the momentum of coalition building got lost between September till January. In fact, something which they should have worked out last year itself, I think Congress thought we are going to do well in assembly elections, and then we'll negotiate from a position of strength. When results came out in December, BJP had done exceptionally well in the Hindi heartland state. Now, that may also have happened because the inauguration of Ram Temple was scheduled to take place in January, and it might have created some atmosphere in favor of BJP. But the result of December 2023 started showing cracks in the India alliance. Nitish Kumar, who was being considered as one of the architects, flips from India alliance and joins BJP. Congress party starts the next set of Bharat Jodo Yatra, this time from east to west. And as they enter in West Bengal, there was a problem with Mamata Banerjee, Trinamool Congress. So while Mamata Banerjee continues to be part of the alliance, she said nothing doing with Congress party and seat adjustment. And so to me, like at that time, like that was my anticipation. And that's where I think I'm a bit more surprised with the performance of India. I thought that because they lost crucial month, it would become harder for them to put up or mount an effective challenge to the BJP everywhere. And especially in some of these key states like West Bengal. And I also thought UP, while Congress and SP alliance is a formidable alliance, in 2019, SP had a much formidable alliance with BSP being part of it. And so my expectation was, while the contest might become keener, BJP, because the kind of victory it had last time, it would be hard to reverse things completely. I think where opposition got things right this time, so some credit to Congress party and Rahul Gandhi, there was a little bit more clarity on the ideological line. I think there was a like momentum of some of the mobilizational efforts that his Bharat Jodo Yatra did. They took a back seat, sort of like needled or weaved this alliance. And I think their campaign platform and counter offensive on BJP's narratives of Ab Ki Baar, 400 Par, and other things, all of this combined together. And there was less, I would say, personal attack on Prime Minister Modi, though there were attacks, but less compared to what happened in 2019. And so all of this created perhaps a little bit more favorable momentum for the alliance and the Congress party. Now, the reason alliances worked in some places like UP and Maharashtra, but didn't work in places like Delhi and Bihar. Congress did well in some places like Haryana and Rajasthan, but wasn't able to challenge in Gujarat, Madhya Pradesh, and Karnataka. I think it then boils down to confluence of various factors that went against BJP, along with the demographic setting and everything, right? So it's coming to like at some point, Congresses or alliances own doing, BJP's some of the undoings might have crossed a threshold, and it resulted in loss for BJP in some places, and in other places BJP was able to sort of keep itself safe. So yes, in comparison to past, there was much more sort of energy and momentum in Congress party's campaign. There was a focus on economic and social justice kind of platform. And then there are sort of like conspiracy theory and other things. Perhaps BJP, in its own overconfidence, did not think hard about the candidate selection, as SP, some people had been pointing out, did in case of Uttar Pradesh. I think it also shows the limits of some of the issues we talked about, right? Like the ideological polarization or over dependence on Prime Minister Modi's appeal, or over dependence that mere sort of like welfare in form of giving food grains and some other things to poor would be enough to keep them voting for you.
That's a very good point, right? And again, in a first past the post system, you just need that marginal shift in one way or the other. And what is basically a close contest becomes a wipeout essentially because of the nature of the system. I want to come to now the government itself, or the makeup of the Lok Sabha itself. And I want your view on a couple of things that I'm thinking about. One, the last 10 years have basically been a BJP-led government, not an NDA-led government. And now the dynamics will shift, like assuming that Chandrababu Naidu and Nitish Kumar stay with the NDA, which is the likely scenario at this point. The Prime Minister and Amit Shah will have to engage in a very different style of politics than they have. And that then means that the internal dynamics at play within the BJP and then within the NDA as an extension will be much more different. Would love your thoughts on that one. And then secondly, related to that, given that dynamic, we saw over the last 10 years that that centralization of power meant that things just went through the system, whether right or wrong, but they just went through the system because there was a central force that could muscle its way through the Lok Sabha and other mechanisms. That seems not to be the case anymore. It's the return of old school coalition politics. So how do you see things evolving in the Lok Sabha and in the broader sort of system of Delhi, where now after 10 years, old school coalition politics are back?
Uzair, first I complete, like, as you pointed out, the caveat, which is that yes, if BJP comes back to power with Prime Minister Modi at the helm of affairs, and in next 48 to 72 hours, some of these mechanizations are going to play out, and we'll know by the weekend what has happened. But it's definitely true that BJP is coming with a reduced sort of power in parliament, and they have to be much more accommodative of their allies. In last 10 years, BJP's own ambitious and expansionist impulse made allies sort of like dependent on them. Allies also, like in some ways, BJP portrayed that you're winning because of us and Prime Minister Modi's appeal, not the other way around. Though BJP has also been agile, like just before elections, it will bring all kinds of players within its ambit. And some of those allies or smaller parties are like also want a share of power, so they've been joining the alliance. But this time it's going to be different. BJP to run the government is going to be dependent on allies, and especially they would need both Chandrababu Naidu and Nitish Kumar. Because that gives them some elbow room to govern. Not only, so think of it. First, I think the dynamics within BJPs are going to change. Earlier, Prime Minister Modi and Amit Shah combined, like, would have had a like much more ability to call shots on who gets into cabinets and who becomes chief minister and other things. I think now there are going to be many more pressure points within the BJP. I think Some players from RSS, Rashtriya Swayamsevak Sangh, are also going to assert it. It's the nature of politics, right? So there is going to be some sort of like renegotiation of power dynamics within the BJP. Second, I think, as you rightly pointed out, the power dynamics within the NDA is going to change. Allies are going to demand their pound of flesh. They will also ask for much more important cabinet positions. They can also go for speaker's position in Lok Sabha to ward off any kind of attempted poaching by the BJP in future. And I think the relationship which legislative party BJP had with all other institutions because of its dominance is going to change. You will see a little bit more assertion, or at least projection of autonomy by some of the players, including, I hope, national media and election commission and some of those organizations. But I also want to add a caveat here. Leaders are not constrained by numbers, right? Yes, it puts a constraint, but it also depends on your ability. One, how you're going to read the mandate and how you're going to project yourself. And this is going to be a dynamic situation rather than static, frozen in the results of 2024. I would say that every 3 to 6 months, this situation would see some sort of like seesaw shift. And the reason why I'm saying this, just to give you an example, and I'm not saying it's all dependent on electoral politics. In 4 months from now or 5 months from now, three key states are going for assembly elections: Maharashtra, Haryana, and Jharkhand. In all three states, BJP hasn't done well. In fact, they faced a rout in Maharashtra, lost half of seats in Haryana, and few seats in Jharkhand. And in Jharkhand, the chief minister, like former chief minister Sibu Soren, was arrested, and perhaps there was some sort of like tribal consolidation in favor of JMM there. So if BJP continues to underperform in those three states, I think the power of Prime Minister Modi and BJP will get further decline, and allies will assert more. However, if they win those three states, then there will be another chance to sort of like renegotiate things. So to me, it would be a shifting sort of like sort of dynamics depending upon how BJP continues to perform in the domestic political arena, what kind of consensus building strategies it takes forward, what kind of accommodation it makes of allies, what kind of arm twisting strategies it has for smaller players. And all of these options, because they are open, I would carefully watch out what's happening rather than making a conclusive statement that you are going to see a much weaker BJP for all 5 years.
No, those are very, very important points, right? And I want to underline how the leader reads the mandate itself. That's very important. I mean, I follow Pakistani politics a lot more closely. And this was the issue with Mr. Khan, that he felt that he was dominant as a political player and read the mandate in a very different way than many others expected. And that led to all sorts of issues with him and his coalition allies over time, and they soured on him over time as things changed, and that's very important to understand and keep an eye out on. As a follow-up to that point, I want to ask is, obviously it's not just electoral dynamics about how the economy is doing, what you're trying to push through the Lok Sabha, what are the priorities that you're pushing through. How do you see the space for meaningful reforms, right? I was looking, Milan Vaishnav had put out a chart on X earlier this morning about like what's easy, what's moderate, what's really difficult. And the difficult part, it was land and labor reforms, farm reforms, for example. Easy was more PLI subsidies, or easy was give a special status to Bihar or Andhra Pradesh and things like that. The Prime Minister, obviously, I think it was on Sunday, that he published an op-ed in the Indian Express, saying that it's not just about economic reforms. We need to do more than this. Was obviously with the anticipation that the mandate would be much stronger. But how do you see the space for meaningful reforms or the BJP getting its way on what it believes to be meaningful reform in this Lok Sabha?
No, true. See, first of all, I think Prime Minister is right in saying it's not just about economic reforms, right? What this election also point out, even if BJP had won, those who are observing Indian politics and society at a much deeper level would understand that you need sort of like reforms in many directions. There is a lot of social churning going on. And it's not just economic anxieties, but you need to accommodate social and cultural aspirations of a large number of groups. We had some setbacks, I would say, on India's northeastern front. I would also say this election points out deep and troubling social tensions that are brewing up in Punjab. And so, from that perspective, I think anyone who comes to power will be wearing sort of like a cap with lots of thorns, and we need to be mindful of that. See, what we have learned from the coalition era of Indian politics, and in fact, Nuruddin has written a very important book on this, that while policies and reforms take little bit more time to see the light of the day, but once they are put on the table, then they are much more likely to get accepted. What that means is that in a diverse country like India, coalition politics is basically then representing all kinds of diverse voices. So it slows the process a little bit, but it reaches through a consensus and then becomes acceptable to everyone, right? Majorities and brute majorities are not the way to get things done in India. BJP had tried to do that with some of the legislations, and they have not been able to pass through, despite having a large majority in Lok Sabha, because different interest groups are going to fight with you on that tooth and nail. And in a sort of competitive electoral democracy, at least this election puts rest to, if anyone had doubt, any incumbent would be mindful that you can push to an extent, but you can't go beyond that. So to my mind, I think coalition government will open that opportunity where there is a consensus building across different social, political, and economic elites before something is put through the parliament. And once it happens, it will be easily sort of like see the light of the day. So I wouldn't say like farm laws are extremely difficult and cannot be passed now because you have a lesser majority. It wasn't done with bigger majority for sure. I think if it can see the light of the day, it will see through a coalition government because there is going to be a more consensus building. What this will definitely do is BJP's way of making unit, like there would be some checks and balances on unilateral decision making.
I think that that's totally right. And Dr. Nuruddin's book is something I recommended half a dozen times in the last 12 hours to people, being like, coalitions do work, they do get things done. The evidence is very clear. And these are, as you said, stickier, more acceptable reforms. So that's very important. Last question on my side. You mentioned a few things, right, in terms of what you're looking out for, assembly elections, what the coalition allies demand and are able to get, etc. But just as a follow up to that, like what are some 3 to 4 additional things that you would tell our audience to keep an eye out on, let's say over the next 6 to 12 months, to better understand where this new era of coalition politics in Indian democracy is headed to and what this will play out like?
So I think multiple things to watch out for, right? With this election, how like it's a message to national media and all kind of autonomous institutions, including election commission and other things, that please do your duty. You don't have to be in tune with the government every time. I think we should see that more voices of constructive criticism against the government become visible. I think the second thing to watch out for is uh, how sticky or like what kind of negotiations take place within the opposition space itself. You would hope in a competitive electoral democracy, if BJP comes back to power with these allies, the job of opposition becomes a little bit more in terms of like once you're out of power, how you keep yourself engaged and what kind of new agendas that you bring on the table for government to sort of like think or get a pushback on. So oppositional politics would be very, very important, both within the wall of like parliamentary politics, but also outside it. Uh, Third thing to be looking forward is definitely electoral politics and how BJP is doing and how accommodative it has become of some of these sort of like regional parties and their interest. Fourth, I would see, like expect from our government to basically think of a serious economic blueprint or agenda and start acting on that. Invest seriously in field of research and health and human capital because we have a very, very large population. The young population by nature is very anxious, and especially if its economic aspirations will not be met. So that, to me, if we don't do something urgent on that front, given the size of our population, we are sitting on a pile of disaster. And I would also hope that in places where we had sort of like domestic or national security concerns, be it in central India or northeast or in Punjab, there is, or even in south, where there is being a demand that like we pay more taxes, but we get lesser share from the central revenue. I think whoever comes to power offers a grand federal bargain. If you do want to see India progress and India continue to remain on a high growth path or a higher growth path and take advantage of the geopolitical situation, we need to take our states along and we need to do a great federal bargain. A centralizing tendency in a diverse centripetal force, but we need to do a grand federal bargain. So I would be looking on some of those aspects.
Yeah, and I think if there's one thing we can definitely draw out from the results itself, right, is that the collective polity of India wants that bargain. They know that they kind of still trust Narendra Modi to be prime minister, but not too much power. So they've checked that power. Different coalitions have spoken in different ways in this election, and they've sent all of this diversity to the parliament saying, "Go solve our problems. We've given you the mandate," right? So I fully agree, and that's the beauty of a competitive electoral democracy, that now you will see for the next few years all of this in play with the churn that we're seeing in the state elections, etc. Before I let you go, first of all, thank you for your time and for these wonderful insights. I see a stack of books behind you. I always ask my guests what are two or three books you would recommend. They can be on any topic, but would love to hear your recommendations for the audience.
So, Uzair, it's hard for me to like, recommend two or three books, but I'll just like, since we discussed about coalition politics, I would definitely say, because there's a lot of misconceptions about coalitions, like policy paralysis during coalitions and economic growth don't take place and other things. So I would definitely recommend people to read Dr. Professor Irfan Nuruddin's book on coalition politics. I would also say, since uh, like where and I would need some more comments and help in thinking about this. Along with my advisor, Pradeep Chubbar, I have written a book on ideology and identity and how it has shaped party politics in India. To read that, but also from a perspective, if you can help me thinking about, how to test some of these ideas much more at the state level. This was a historical sort of exercise. I think since some of your listeners are going to be in India and Pakistan, I do want them to read at least one of my favorite Hindi books, Rag Darbari. Like Rag Darbari was written in a setting of 1960s and 70s, sort of rural heartland places. So how now, if you have to imagine a Rag Darbari in 2020s, how that would look like. So not reading that book from the perspective they were written, but if these authors have to think how to write a similar book in the current context, what should they be thinking and doing? So that would be my three recommendations. I have many more books to recommend, but somehow it is hard for me. I do read more sort of political science book. It is hard for me to say which one book you should definitely read. Read as much as you can, because they each of them point you to something interesting.
No, thank you for those recommendations and for the last Rag Darbari recommendation itself. I will definitely check that one out, especially from the context of how you would think about this book today and put that setting on. Thank you so much again for taking out the time. This was a wonderful conversation, and would love to have you again on the podcast in the future as this coalition dynamic evolves in India. And again, thank you for all your work and for your insights.
Thank you, Zair, and I'm very happy I'm part of this podcast, but also on a very special episode 200. So thank you for having me.
Thank you.